you should accept women are not equal to men. And that was where I was like,
I guarantee you there
Why?
is zero chance of World War III.
why should I wear hijab when I don't believe in that? No, I cannot accept that.
This is not just a story about Iran. This is a story about freedom, identity, and what it really takes to become yourself in a world that is trying to decide who you should be.
This is not just Iran's story. This is a story of law, fear, and control. Of women forced to accept rules they never chose. Of people refusing to lose their identity. A woman who says, I cannot accept this system. A voice that says, we are not naive. Behind the politics, this is the real human story.
Today's conversation is one that matters deeply. My guest is an Iranian-born engineer, a PhD, mind shaped by logic and precision. Yet her life has been defined by something far more visceral, courage. Through her platform, Becoming Layla, she speaks for women whose voices have been silenced, women who have been controlled, imprisoned, and in many cases, abused simply for existing freely. She represents a generation caught between oppression and awakening, where choosing authenticity can come at an extraordinary cost. This is not just a story about Iran. This is a story about freedom, identity, and what it really takes to become yourself in a world that is trying to decide who you should be. Absolutely, but I'm going to introduce Arash as well, and Arash is here. If I may say, actually, Layla and I met when I was on a run in Sydney Harbour, and there was this silent demonstration going on, which was quite moving. Just to give the backstory to viewers. And I wondered what was going on, and you were talking to some security at the time. Yeah, I sort of intervened, and interestingly, we find out. Yeah, that's okay. My pleasure. Thanks for everything you're doing and representing what your movement is. But it was a very interesting encounter, and to hear about your story and why you were demonstrating. So before we dig in deep to that, Arash has welcomed us as well, has joined us. We've sort of got the heart and mind situation here. Layla wanted Arash to be here also to give some of the political commentary on what's going on, also being from Iran. But maybe firstly, Layla, we get into just your background quickly as an intro to give some context, and then Arash, and then we'll dig in, Layla, with yourself. And as some of the issues come up, then Arash can sort of give some color to that as well from a political view.
Sounds great. Yeah. So I'd like to start with thanking Tommy for this opportunity for us to be the voice of Iranians. This means a lot because at the moment, as you can see, we don't have a lot of voices for a lot of different reasons. A lot of different medias have chosen to keep silence or provide misinformation about what's going on in Iran. And platforms like this, which is for freedom and without really any political sides, is valuable because it's exactly where we can really reflect the voice of Iranians as much as we can. And a bit about myself, I'm Layla, as you introduced. I'm from Iran and now based in Sydney. I've got a PhD in chemical engineering and at the moment working in water utilities as construction manager. And what's happening right now in Iran, it's not just political for me. As you can see, it's deeply personal. It's because my family, my friends, a lot of people that I love, a lot of places that I love are, and the whole country is directly impacted and affected by everything that's happening there. So yeah, it's a great opportunity to be their voice. Like I was feeling a responsibility when it is the digital blackout, and we rarely can talk to our families and friends there. And when their rare voices that come from Iran is asking us to be their voices, it's a big responsibility and it's really something heavy on my shoulders, and platforms like this is really helping. Thanks for that.
My pleasure. Yeah, thanks again for what you're doing. And there's always risk in sort of getting out there on the pointy end of things. But when you feel strongly about certain things, and I know yourself, like myself, is a lover of humanity, and yours specifically around women and what's happening with women also in Iran. But before we dig into that, and we'll probably start, so you have some time to think, with your childhood, and maybe we start from there, and your immigration to into Australia. But Arash, give us a quick intro, and your background as well.
Sure. Hey, Tammy, thanks for having us. I'm Arash, also Iranian Australian. Like Layla was saying, for many Iranians, including myself, what is happening in Iran is quite personal and very important to us because, it's been almost about 50 years of this current regime ruling over Iran. And, from the get-go, and we will get into the weeds when we go into the depths of the politics of it. You will see that this regime is almost like I would say, terrorist organization. That might come to be used as a very strong word, but I will explain why, and that's probably where I want to sort of emphasize on people not being actually misled by why the Islamic regime is trying to propagate to the world, and what is the true nature of this regime and how they have terrorized people inside Iran and outside Iran over time. And this is time finally for Iranians and the world to say enough, and we just have to sort of put to end to this terror. It is again very personal for me because I grew up there. I'm an engineer by background, so I studied my university there, and then I migrated to Australia as an engineer and been here for about 16, 17 years, and working with water utilities, almost same field as Layla. But you can never lose that connection and that root, from your country of your childhood. So we're here to sort of be the voice of Iranians, but also put a bit more light on what this regime looks like, how they operate, how they sort of try to sort of misrepresent what is actually happening. And we really appreciate giving a platform for us to sort of express that.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for making the time. Obviously we're having some issues with your camera there, so hopefully we might be able to sort that out while I'm questioning Layla on a couple of things here regarding her background. So all right, thanks, Arash. Be good to get your sort of view on the landscape and what's happening from a political strategy point of view. Layla, let's dig into the heart of the matter, I guess might be the words to use. So, I mean, you grew up, you were a child in Iran. What did it feel like as a young girl growing up in Iran?
So I had a family that was always supportive of humanity in general. It was never about women or men or boys and girls. And as a kid, I was always thinking I'm the same as others. And maybe that was the reason that when I entered the society and I started seeing how it's different, I started challenging everything from the very young ages. And it wasn't acceptable to me. That's why I'm not equal to my other, like to the guys, like in everything, as even as the childhood, and then when I entered like the teenage age. And what was very heartbreaking for me was that I wasn't even able to challenge my assumption in the society, in the community, with the people who were, because like I was going to the gifted school, and the gifted school were all the schools that it was heavily governed by that Islamic ideology. And I remember, like, as a kid, even when I wanted to question anything, I was always like labeled as a challenging person, like a difficult person to deal with. And it was like, because my family, even my extended family, questioning and challenging was a norm, and it was like totally fine and perfectly fine to feel equal. So when I like entered my, I think, teenage age, I realized that this Islamic Republic regime, or whatever we want to call it, has ruled Iran through repression for ages. I started to see all the mass executions that had happened when I was a kid. I didn't even know about them. I didn't even know what's going on with my family members when they were killed. Obviously, I had no visibility as a child that while these people are being murdered and executed, and we can't even mourn for them because that Islamic regime was coming to us and didn't even let us to mourned for the people who were killing. So those mass executions. Then when I was like a teenage, I remember the student crackdowns. So we were, even before I go to university, there was a lot of protests, like very peaceful protests by the students, which was brutally shut down. And then the killing of those protests, I remember as a teenage, that's how difficult it was for me to see like the students were being attacked in front of us, and that was so terrifying. And then killing of the protest, then tortures. The more I was going to the community and society, the more I was seeing about these killings, torture, the detention, politically charged executions, and the repeated internal blackouts, recent things that happened to hide the truth. So all these were really heartbreaking. And then aside everything that is happening for human beings there who were just wanting their very basic human right, it was then the women rights. So as a woman, it was not acceptable to me to see why I should live with double standards. I was born in a family, as I said, that I never had to wear hijab, but it was just as at home. And then when I was going out of home, then it was suddenly a different environment. And I was like, why is that? Why should I wear hijab when I don't believe in that? I don't mind if someone believes in that, that's totally fine to me. But why is it compulsory to do the things that I don't like to do? Like, why is it legal discrimination in even basic women rights, like traveling? Why, if I get married, why can't I leave country without my husband's permission? Or why is that legally women, like young age daughters, can get married, like young age marriage, all these things, or like all the discriminations about divorce, custody, then the inheritance even, and all those things were part of our daily life. And there were all the things that when I was questioning, all I could like all I was hearing was like, don't question these. These are all based on Islamic rules, and you are living in an Islamic country, and you should accept women are not equal to men. And that was where I was like, no, I cannot accept that. So yeah, it's like long. I can talk about it for hours and hours, but all those things that I mentioned was giving me the impression that this is not somewhere that I want to live, and this is really not making sense to me. And it's interesting that I never got married in Iran, because even getting married in Iran was difficult for me to sign some Islamic rules that I'm not equal. I then, after signing this, I have to listen to someone else. Even though I trusted that someone else, I couldn't trust that the whole thing that is happening, that the laws that are against women. So yeah, that was the reason that I was always I started to become that trouble kid. Like everywhere I was going, I was bringing some troubles to the family, to people. And then yeah, like I think it was too late for me to immigrate. Like at the age of 30 something, I finally decided to make that tough decision. And it wasn't about immigration at the time, because um, the Islamic regime has made life so difficult for me and a lot of other people around us, that I kind of decided to escape for a while. I applied to do my PhD in Australia, and I was lucky because I got my like I got a scholarship, from full scholarship from Newcastle University, to do my PhD here. Then obviously, after living here and understanding I can live free And by free, I mean I can be the person that I want to be, and not with the everything that is imposed on me. That was the meaning of freedom, becoming who I want to be. So I kind of chose to live in this country and call it home. And I was very lucky because I could get my permanent residency pretty easy, and then I could call this home easily because it gave me a lot of the things that I didn't have in my homeland because of all this Islamic rules that was like imposed on our lifestyle, daily lifestyle. So yeah, that's about me and the things that I decided to immigrate, come to Australia.
Wow. So you felt obviously it didn't feel right to you. It didn't feel normal for you. What were, and maybe this is also a question for Arash. I mean, what are the unspoken rules that you had to follow growing up? I mean, both of you. It's quite different for the men and the females by the sounds, but yeah.
To be honest, not really. Like, I know that for women it's a lot worse, but in general, I think the whole idea of that we have to live by the rules that we haven't chosen and the rules that we can't even question, I think that's the real issue that we had. Like, we didn't have the chance to challenge anything. We didn't have the chance to choose what we want to do. Like, even the very basic things, like what to eat, what to drink, even have a pet. Like, the things that you can't even imagine, they're all forbidden in Iran because of all those Islamic things. So, and as I said, the thing that was challenging for me was that we had one life at home and in our family. So we were at home, we were eating what we want, we could drink, we could do whatever, we could meet the guys without hijab. And then as soon as you leave home, it was totally different. And I was like, why? Like, why we are not alike our government? Why is that so much distance between who we are and what is imposed on us? That was the thing that was not acceptable to me. And as I said, like, that was for the childhood, like, and it was like always the fear of not expressing who you really are because of the consequences. And my mom was always, my father passed away when I was 6, but my mom was always saying, Layla, I know you and I know that you are always for this, and I trust you, but don't do something that I have to come and grab you from prison. And even when I wanted to go to the uni, the interesting part was my mom was praying, because I don't know if you know that the system in Iran is that you have to have because the education is free, and there is an entrance exam to go to university, and based on that entrance exam, you can go, like, obviously you start going from the best universities, and when you go to very good universities, normally the students there are the ones that are thinking and challenging. So those universities were never safe. By safe, I mean you had to, as a student, you wanted to challenge, and there were a lot of like-minded people who you could challenge stuff, and then you were oppressed really badly. And there were a lot of things that my mom was always praying for me to not go to a good university, because she was always saying that you will definitely be killed and you will definitely end up in jail. So that's why she didn't want me to go to a good university. And that's like really heartbreaking, because she wasn't feeling that I will be safe if I go somewhere that I can express my feelings. Anyway, like, I let Arash to speak as well, and then I can go back to my childhood
I
again.
think you were spot on what you described. I mean, the fact that you can have your personal life, and this regime wants to sort of pretty much intervene in any aspect of your life, the most private aspect of your life, to sort of, because they're not like a normal dictator, put it that way. It's not just about economy. It's not just about who you want to vote in or vote out of an office. It's about the ideology and of a theocracy where they want to sort of, control you, control your body, control your manners, control your private life. And it is very sort of disturbing when you start to grow up. Obviously, as a kid, it's, as Layla was saying, it's, because your brain hasn't developed as much, I suppose, you kind of accept it as it is. But the more you start to grow up, you kind of go, well, why would I, put up with this? And that's where you see the more and more you see the people that are being sort of brutalized or being murdered by this regime, they're the young kids. Either they're in the school age or they're in university age, and that's by far the most impacted sort of age range that you can see, because they're kind of going, we have no future with this regime, and the way that they have managed the country, obviously. So when we grew up, it was relatively the Islamic revolution was new, right? So, and then they went through the war with Iraq, and then after that they wanted to sort of rebuild the country per se. And I think the power grip by the so-called supreme leader, which is killed now, wasn't that ultimate. He still was managing through multiple factions of the power structure within the Islamic regime. So he didn't have the ultimate power. And there arguably there are some factions that had a more moderate view of the war, and would still within the same system, by the way, but they would probably allow a little bit more freedom, just a little bit more freedom to people. But over time, he pretty much crushed anything, any discontent, and sort of consolidated the power. And now he got Iran to where it is now. Like the young generation, they don't have any sort of hope of what the future might be for them. And I think that's where people sort of kind of going, well, to be honest, do I even want to live this life? And you see these young, brave Iranians kind of going, I either go and free my country or I'll rather die, kind of thing. And that's a very terrible situation to be in. But this is what, so this is the analogy I put forward to my non-Iranian friends, and like, imagine it's 1940, right? And you are a Jew and you're living in Nazi Germany, right? How would you feel about the ruling government in your country? But in this case, it's not about the religion for Iranians. It's like Iranians, and this regime is absolutely anti-Iranian. They try. Over 50 years, they tried to take away the Iranian identity and replace that by Islamic identity. And that's why this revolution, the flag that we have is for example, the sun and lion flag, which is the historical flag that represents Iran, the history of Iran, the greatness of the Persia and all that. Because people want to go back to that identity. People want to sort of represent that. This, no disrespect to every religion, but the identity of Iranians is not Islam. If you go back to history, 1400 years ago, Islam came to Iran by obviously those people, Muslims, fighting and massacring Iranians and actually enforcing Islam on Iranians. And it's amazing, after 1400 years, Iranians have that memory still, and we sort of identifying ourselves differently, and we want to have that identity. But this regime, they're quite the opposite, and that's why you see that sort of the gulf in sort of what they want, how they want to rule, and what the Iranian people want, and how they want to live. So yeah, that's overall the sort of a bit of a background about how people generally feel in the country. And the other thing is, like, after a while, you can only go so long, in my view, because Layla made a really good point. Your normal life in private is so different to what the government is trying to get people to do, that is, in my view, is unsustainable. So we knew that at some point these were going to sort of exploit let's say, in society, and people, they're not going to have it anymore. It started probably the first time in 2009 with what was called the Green Revolution. Back then, it wasn't about actually toppling the regime. I think back then it was, people wanting to, even within the constitution of this regime, have the voice heard. There was an election which the opposition figure to the supreme leader, probably won by a landslide, but the supreme leader sort of manipulated the votes and everything. So he got the person he wanted as a president. Ahmadinejad, people may have heard of him. He's the first president of the regime who denied Holocaust, by the way. And that's when they strongly started to pursue the nuclear sort of ambitions and going towards making nuclear bomb and all that sort of stuff. So that's when it started, and over time, every 3, 4, 5 years, that has started, but it's just getting worse and worse until this past January, where people took to the street by millions. I'll come to that. I'll explain that why and how it happened. But the regime was like, if you're not going to kill these guys, the regime is gone. Like, believe me, if they had not killed more than 50,000 people, the regime would have gone. We wouldn't be talking about the regime anymore. So that was the only way they could stop it. But yeah, that's probably a little bit for you about the background and how the life in Iran is, and how different it is for people in their private life versus what the government is trying to do and sort of control people in every aspect of life.
Okay, I mean, this is a lot to digest, right? And I think if there's anything those people gave their lives for, hopefully this is the beginning of the change right now. Another question for Arash, because I know you'll have to leave before Layla, and I want to get into Layla's story, but setting the scene of the information you have in the background and the context of what's been happening in the history from a political point of view is quite important. I remember when the hostage scene happened and all that, and back when the Shah was there, been around long enough to remember that whole scenario. How was it that shift happened, where the Shah went? He had to flee, and maybe because of things that were going wrong on a different level at that time, that he left the country. It seemed to be a vacuum left. Somehow the Islamic regime managed to get control. Ayatollah Khomeini came in, who's no longer with us. What actually happened there? How did that situation eventuate?
Yeah, so I'm going to make this brief because obviously the history is out there. People can go and sort of look at that, and sort of understand. But I tell you from an Iranian perspective, and and sort of how they feel about the event, because what happened actually is what happened.
A lot of the younger generations won't even know about this, right?
Yeah,
we're talking 47 years ago.
Sure.
And I think you can summarize some key points for them to understand what's going on and why.
Yeah. So yeah, it was 1979 they happened. Iran obviously been ruled prior to that by Pahlavi dynasty, sort of in terms of the actual structure. It was sort of the monarchy, but sort of parliamentary monarchy. But over time, the monarchs got more and more power, obviously, because the parliament, for whatever reason, wasn't doing its job. But what was remarkable was that how sort of the development and how developed Iran was at the time, right? But sort of the population, I think, at the time wasn't catching up with the level of development. I think that was one of the key issues. And sort of, there is still the religious background within the population, not the whole country, but the religious population with the religious background with the population. They sort of, seeing this modernization of the country, right? And I'm not saying everything was perfect, by the way, right? No country in the world is perfect. But if you look at the basics that you need in life. You need relative freedom, you need development, you need to be able to pay your bills at the end of the day, and you want respect inside your country and outside. I think Iranians had a lot of that. Obviously way, way, way more than what they have right now. And but their modernization, I think, was coming at a cost to the society where Shah has this view for Iran. I think he wanted Iran to be maybe the top 10, for example, or the top 5 in the world from every aspect that you think. So he was sort of pursuing that. Unfortunately, he also had cancer where he couldn't sort of publicize that as well. So that's why I think expedited his sort of push and aggressiveness for this modernization. And the society probably didn't catch up with it. And that's my take of it, right? If you talk to, I don't know, someone, they may sort of tell you a different angle, but I think that's my take and my understanding. And that's what led to the unrest. And if this guy wanted to stay and do the same thing as what the Islamic regime is doing, he could kill his way out of that, and he could stay in power, right? But he truly loved Iran. He truly loved Iran, and he truly loved Iranians. And so he was like, well, people don't want me, so I'm not going to kill them. I'm just going to go out. And that's what led to toppling of the that system. And then Khomeini came in. Khomeini was sort of, there were multiple factions within that revolution. But Khomeini came in, and then sort of he started, pretty much eliminating all the rivals in the power structure. So I think within maybe 3-4 years, they consolidated powers, the theocrat, then from there he sort of started to sort of be the Islamic regime that you see today, effectively. It was, in my view, a big mistake back then. A lot of people ask, why you think getting rid of this regime is not a mistake, because there are historical parallels. Like if you get rid of the Nazi regime in Germany, it wasn't a mistake. It's very easy to understand that, right? You can't say, what worse could come out of getting rid of a Nazi regime? There's nothing worse than that could come. Like if someone is burning Jews in fairness, there's nothing worse than that come out of that. And what we have lived through this terrorist regime, there's nothing really worse than these guys that could come out. A lot of stuff they put on us in terms of how they've been trying to repress Iranians. So, for example, in 2022, when the last wave of protest happened because of the killing of Mahsa Amini, I think it went on for 6 to 9 months. It got to a point where they couldn't control the schools and the universities, and they started to sort of use the chemical weapons on the schools. It is documented. You just go and Google it. But obviously, because it wasn't done like on a whole city, it wasn't reported as much. And unfortunately, I think Layla mentioned this at the beginning. I'm not sure, for whatever reason, Western media doesn't have an interest in this stuff. The West, like the main media, like the likes of CNN or AP or I don't know, Reuters or those guys, they really don't have an interest in this. But if a Western country goes and just kind of poke someone in Iran, it's all over the news. It's just a bias how it's been reported. But I'm just trying to make an example of how brutal they are. And some people may go, but they can't be that bad as Nazis. But believe me, these guys are as bad as Nazis. Like maybe even worse. Like they're even worse. They will not hesitate to do anything. So you see, anything that was done in Syria before Bashar al-Assad toppled, anything that was done, it was all being done by the Islamic regime. Remember, Assad used chemical weapons on his own cities. Remember that? All of that was done by the Islamic regime, because Assad was not as sort of, like he was obviously a dictator, but he didn't know all of these playbooks. Anything that is happening in Hamas today, by Hamas today in Gaza, they use tospitals as human shields, so they can use that to their advantage as propaganda, because they fire off missiles out of hospitals. And once Israel sort of tells people to evacuate hospitals, we're going to have to, bombard this place. Missiles are coming out. All of that is the playbook by the Islamic regime. They're doing it today, right now, as we speak, in Iran. So do not be surprised if a news comes out in a week or so that says, a school was hit, and Israel or US hit a school, but it is not a school anymore. If you're using it for firing off missiles, and if you're putting all of your weaponry and logistics in there, these guys are as terrible as you can imagine. These guys are the Hitlers and the Nazis of 21st century. And when they fall, and if they fall, it'd be remarkable. It was like the biggest event in 21st century in terms of the geopolitics of the world. Mark my words, because just now this morning, they attacked Diego Garcia, which is 4,000 kilometers away from Iran. So their sort of so-called spokesperson, the state minister, he was on TV, I think a couple of weeks ago, telling, I think it was CBS News, oh no, we limited our missile capability to 2,000 kilometers only. And just today, they tried to fire a missile of 4,000 kilometer range to Diego Garcia, which is a base in, Indian Ocean used by UK and US. Do you know what that means? That means they can pretty much cover all of Europe, all the way to London, to Paris, to Berlin. So then there were 2 weeks ago, they were just, with a straight face telling the world, no, we just limited our missile ranges to 2,000 kilometers. This is who you are dealing with, basically. There's no trust that you can have on these guys. The only real solution is to eliminate this regime, not just for us. I think as Iranian, we are fighting on behalf of the world, to be honest, trust me, to get rid of these guys. Because imagine these guys have 4,000 kilometer missile, and then you don't do anything. They will definitely develop capability to hit continental US at some point, I'm pretty sure, and they will definitely develop atomic bomb if you don't eliminate them. And then imagine they can just get the whole world as hostage, not just Iranian people. The difference with North Korea is that China keeps them at check, but these guys, there's no one to keep these guys at.
Yeah. My God.
And that, yeah.
We're, obviously what we're discovering now, while the pressure is on, and seeing the beast really rear its head and what it's capable of so far. And look, every other country, be it China, Russia, US, certainly hasn't been, 100% innocent in the past, but this is this is completely next level, no holes barred. And
Absolutely.
it's just mind blowing. Let alone the story that Layla's going to give a bit later, and sort of just being a woman or an individual there. But what do you think the real motive was for the US combined with Israel, who has their motives? What do you think the real motive was to go in? There's the oil story. There's for me, I would like to think that they've gone in because of the 50,000 or it's 10,000, different report levels, but a lot of people that were killed by this regime in January, right? Which is disgraceful. To me, that is intolerable. That shit cannot happen, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
Straight off the bat, it's not about oil. US doesn't want Iran's oil. It might be a little bit of, do not send your cheap oil to China, but I also don't think that's the real motive. Okay. The Middle East historically has been sort of, divided into two sort of factions, right? So there's all these Islamic theocrats who sort of oppose the great Satan, which is US, and the little Satan, which is Israel. And then, the rest of the Middle East, the Persian Gulf nations, who are sort of US allies, as well as obviously the Israel, right? The problem is when you get to a situation where someone like the Islamic regime is actually expanding its terror network, right? Without actually sort of having their direct sort of line of attack to the likes of Israel or others, they will not stop there, right? They will not stop in the Middle East. I'll give you an example. Australian government sort of dispelled the Islamic regime's sort of so-called ambassador last year, right? Why did that happen? Because of all the attacks that were happening, the arson attacks and everything on synagogues. And you may wonder, well, why would a country 12,000 kilometers away want to do something like this? So it turned out the Islamic regime had hired thugs in Australia, like, people who just do whatever for money, pay them, say, $20,000 here and there, and go and do an arson attack here or arson attack there, just to inflict pain on, Israel and Jews. So this is the nature of a regime that you're dealing with, right? Now, some of the administration are, in my view, since Jimmy Carter, when Shah was there, and then the fall of the Shah, there's been 7 administrations in the US. So if they had a button that they could press and the regime would change, they would do it, right? Immediately. But it's not like that, obviously, right? So it comes at a very, very high cost if they wanted to do regime change. In my view, they made a mistake in 2003 to go to Iraq. They should have gone to Iran instead of Iraq. They misunderstood this. They miscalculated what was the real issue. But obviously, Saddam was not a good player either. So they had to go in there and topple him, and then they did the Afghanistan. And now, sort of regime change in Middle East is a big taboo. So that's why they can't really say that. Right? Nowhere near, like they just talk about the military objectives, and they can't have nuclear weapons and all that sort of stuff. But if you're asking, going back to your question, if you're asking me what is the real motive here?
Yeah.
The real motive is that the Islamic regime will not stop progressing its nuclear and missile sort of ambitions until it get to a point where no one, including USA, can sort of, in their mind, bully them effectively. So what does that mean? That means reaching a capability to be able to hit continental US, which they're not far off from. They can Europe today, which they prove they can now. They've got 4,000 kilometers. Next year or the year after, they should be able to sort of test missile that will hit continental US. And they've got 400 kilograms of 60% uranium enriched. They, depending on who you believe, they were either weeks or months from having testing a nuclear bomb. So that cocktail means if they got both, they could hit continental US, and they go, well, okay, US, now from now on, what do we say in the Middle East? And then for Israel, that's existential threat. Like, I understand there is this whole negative view of Israel in the world for whatever reason. People can have their minds. But on this occasion, Israel is right to say that it is an existential threat. Believe them when they say, if these guys had nukes, they would use it on Israel. Like, it is not a joke, right? If they can kill people in 2 nights, 50,000 people in just 2 nights, and then, just move on, they will. And these are Iranian, they're supposed to be their own people. If they can do this to their own people, what do you think they would hesitate to hit US and Israel? So no, it's not. There is other benefits that you get from these guys being gone. But I think the real motive was at this point really the ballistic missile capability and the nukes. Now, the Islamic regime probably would have even be happy to let the nuke thing go, because US and Israel last June sort of attacked it, and they pushed them back for quite a few years. But the ballistic missile capability, as you can see how they're sort of wreaking havoc across the region, is the main problem. Because in the world, I think there are 13 countries, I could be wrong, but 13 countries got nuclear warhead. They've got ballistic missile capabilities, 13 countries, and only 12 of them got nuclear warheads, and then only one of them who doesn't have nuclear warhead, and that is Islamic regime. Why? Because I think their doctrine of how we want to actually fight back changed since they were kind of thinking the world would not let us having nuclear weapons potentially. Well, let's build thousands and thousands of ballistic missiles, and then every time we attack, we just fire off ballistic missiles. As you know, these are not precise missiles. They would just use it on civilians, energy, water infrastructure, whatever that they can do to do maximum pain and maximum damage. That is their doctrine right now. And it was getting to a point where it was not acceptable to Israel and the US, like, we cannot do this. Now, I think that's the main immediate reason that they went in. The more long-term strategic objective, probably for Israel, because US wants to leave this area if they can.
They want to get out.
Yeah, they want to get out. They're spending maybe up to about $50 billion in security every year in the Middle East. They've got bases and everything. So they've got Israel as a partner for security. But if they could turn Iran, because the population of Iran is so, Western aligned, so pro-US and pro-Israel, that, that would be the greatest win that they could have, like the long-term strategy for them. And that would be a big loss to China and Russia. I think that is the long-term motive. Now, whether they would be able to achieve it with the cost of regime change, if they wanted to do, that's why they're calling upon Iranian people to rise up, because they don't want to put boot on the ground. That remains to be seen. But I think they would definitely. I mean, for Israel, because Israel cannot leave. Israel is here, right? They cannot leave.
Yeah.
So for them, for them, it's so paramount that they have an ally in Iran. 90 million, and then imagine if you're pro-Western, you can definitely then make Middle East a peaceful region. I guarantee you, if the regime falls, Middle East will see peace. But yeah, I think that's the real motive. Do not buy into the oil and all that stuff. US is producing after the shale technology. US wouldn't. It's almost independent in terms of the energy. Why would they? I know oil price is global, but at the end of the day, they could kind of go, well, I don't care about anybody else. I'll just produce for myself. And now they've got Venezuela, who's giving them oil and everything for their refineries in their southern states. So it's not really it's not about oil. I think it's about the security. There might have been not a super immediate threat to US and Israel, but if they left it unchecked, say for a couple of more months, they would have gone to develop that. The sort of the missile capability or the nuclear bomb. Now, the one other thing that you mentioned, I want to quickly address that as well. What about the 50,000 people that were killed? I think that was unfortunately the price of expediting this attack on Islamic regime. I think they were going to attack, but not as quickly as possible that we saw. That's why I think they were not as prepared. So it took them a couple of months since then to bring this whole logistic of war to attack. But I think Trump was genuinely thinking he can get a deal out of these guys. But he's now understanding that the only deal he can enforce on them is by force. But I think he was sort of gearing up maybe for a bit later. But the 50,000 people that were killed forced them to sort of go, well, that would probably give us the political permission. We can sort of use that as a political permission. So I just want to put it out there for whoever that sees this, the Iranians are not stupid. We're not naive, right? We do understand the politics of it, right? But we see an opportunity, a window of opportunity that if these guys are attacking the regime for whatever reason, that gives us an opportunity to also use it on a weakened regime to topple them. It's the you almost the alignment of the goals. It doesn't mean that they're doing this for the humanitarian reasons for us. We're not naive. We're not stupid, right? Just want to put it out there, because a lot of people, oh, well, Trump doesn't have your back, or he doesn't. Yeah, we know. Like, do not.
He's a business. At the end of the
us
day,
and
it's going to look after the US and the US interests.
yeah, exactly. Anyone has to do that. But if you can align your objectives and goals with somebody else who's doing something that benefits you, why would you stop it? Why wouldn't you use it? And I think that's what we're
Right.
doing. So we're not cheering, thinking, oh, now Trump is in love with the Iranians. He wants to free our
Saving us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Thanks, Arash.
What
Very
do you think your
beautiful.
chance? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Arash. Look, my gut feel from the information that I've gotten, anything beyond analog, these days, I believe if it's coming through digital or the TV, it's always how true is that? How real is that picture? So you've really got to take it with a grain of salt. But at a deeper level, I have the same feel from information that's come to me of what's going on and strategically and the level of interest and why. Do you think we're on the brink of what everybody's putting as World War III in the headlines? What's your view on that?
I guarantee you
Why?
there is zero chance of World War III. So you're going to have to think about the players in World War III, right? Who are the other sides of this war? Who wants to do World War III? Just a couple of weeks ago, Bahrain took something to the United Nations in condemning the Islamic regime, and I think it was a very rare moment that pretty much all the countries either approved that resolution or they were just China and Russia. They abstained. They didn't even disapprove. So it was a very rare moment. So Islamic regime doesn't have any friends. True, Russia is giving them some sort of intelligence to use, in terms of striking US sort of bases and things like that. But I think US knows that there's nothing like it's the same thing the US is doing in Ukraine. They're providing a lot of intelligence, a lot of logistics of the war there, even way more than what Russia is doing here. And China is not doing much. I think they sold a lot of these interceptors, land-to-air missile defenses and things like that to Islamic regime. Not the top-notch ones, by the way. Anything that they had in their disposal that they didn't want to use and they were old. To kind of say, oh, here is the favor we're returning to. But I'm pretty sure China and Russia, they don't have the appetite to go. Well, Russia cannot if they wanted to, even because they're pretty much, in Ukraine. They cannot afford another war. So that's Russia. And I think China is focusing on Taiwan. If I was to bet, I would say China would want to go in on Taiwan in the next 5 years prior to 2030. I don't want next 5 years someone see this video and if that happened, they'll say, what did you know? But I think that's what they're trying to do. If you monitor all the military movement they're doing and the maneuvering and everything that they're doing in there, I think that's their interest. They're not interested in this. So no, there is not going to be a world war. European allies of the US and Israel, even though they probably haven't been as strongly involved, but they know the true nature of this regime. And then now the Persian Gulf nations, they probably were a little bit neutral prior to that. Now the Islamic regime has probably attacked them 3 times more than Israel and hitting all the airports and civilian and the energy infrastructure. So these guys are now at the left, right, center trying to dispel the so-called ambassadors of the Islamic regime. So I think it's just a one-sided war, if you ask me.
Right.
To me,
yeah.
So you ask what happens. I don't know what's going to happen. Trump is very unpredictable. But he thought, I think that's my view. This could be wrong. I think he thought he can get a deal out of these guys like Venezuela, right? Because he replaced Maduro, and then when Delcy Rodriguez took in charge, he told her, if you're not gonna listen to what I'm gonna do and I'm telling you to do, you're going to get removed as well, and then the next person and the next person, so on and so forth, until he get to a point where the person that he wants is going to do the thing that he wants. And Delcy Rodriguez was like, I'm assuming she's not a ideologist. She doesn't have all the sort of ideology that these guys in Islam regime have. They say, okay, sure, I do it, and now they're alone, right? it wasn't about nation building. It was not about democracy in Venezuela. It was all about what US wants them to do. I think Trump thought he get rid of the layer one of the Islamic regime and then he will force them to do it. But I think his miscalculation was that these guys, they're like they are jihadists, right? Think of ISS, right? How does ISS operate? They just think about, I'm happy to be martyr if I achieve my goal, right? So now they have eliminated the first layer of the sort of leadership. There's still few people left, but he thinks they can eliminate them to a point where someone comes on top from within the regime to sort of make a deal with him, the things that he wants. But he's mistaken, and this is where I think he's coming to the reality that, well, I either have to find an off ramp, which would be a defeat for him in my view, because if this regime survives, then sort of because they're going to keep continuing. Now they have every incentive to go and develop nuclear bomb and reaching continental US, which I think Trump probably can't afford to do, because everyone's going to go at him from left and right, what did you achieve in there? Or he's going to escalate to the point where he sets the condition for regime change. I'm hoping it's the latter, because that would align with what we want as well. But we see what's going to happen. I think they're going to go, in terms of the immediate action, I think they're going to go and sort of start putting boots on the ground on the southern islands that sort of, is related to the Strait of Hormuz and the sort of the passage of the free shipping and all that sort of stuff. I think that's the main thing for them at the moment as an immediate action, because that directly impacts the price of the oil. But I think beyond that, I don't think he realizes these guys, they're not going to stop until the regime is gone. But there's no chance, like for people who are saying this, be chill. There's not going to be a World War III. I guarantee you.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just the media. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. Obviously, they've got to secure the strait, and that's his key objective, to keep that artery sort of flowing, even though they have enough of oil and processors now to secure their own oil. And they've got Venezuela as well. But now it's the security aspect and the capability in getting rid of it. I did hear one general sort of talking about this, saying that it may be that they're going to have to adopt a process whereby they go in and mow the grass every so often, right? But that's not getting rid of the problem. They've gone in and tried to remove the cancer, and now the cancer is going to come back faster, like you said. So how do you obliterate completely? Very difficult. I know you've got to go. Final question. So it sounds like his 6 weeks sort of commitment, saying 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, and Hegseth saying 4 to 6 weeks, and we're out. I'm getting a feeling from you that it's going to be longer, number one. Number two, let's say they are successful to the point where they get enough control in there that, and I asked Layla this when I first met her, that we go from potentially the Khomeini's son to the Shah's son temporarily running the place, and to then have a free election. Is that how you sort of see it, and would you support that?
Yeah, I think that's what, and look, it doesn't matter whether I support it or not. It matters whether Iranians support it by large or not. Right? And they do.
Yeah.
They do in millions. Okay. Anyone who tells you otherwise, they're lying to you. We don't have data to sort of, back it up, because obviously the internet is down and sort of, there's no mechanism to sort of substantiate that. But we sort of, you talk to different parts of the society. I'm not saying it's 100% support. But no politician in the world has 100% support in the world. Like, even if you get 51% of the population support in the Western society, that best you can get, right? But I think his support might be within the Iranian society is maybe around 70 to 80%, somewhere there in my view right now. And I think that's good enough for a revolution, and also to make sure a smooth transition. We would have bumpy road in my view, but not for the society to collapse, and leading it to a point where we have a free election. He's got a plan. He's got a 100-day plan, and then beyond that, a 2 years plan to write up the constitution again, and sort of the basically dissolving the prior constitution and sort of writing a new constitution, and then sort of putting up referendums for people to sort of choose their own sort of system of governing and all that sort of stuff. It's a very detailed, I think 180 pages. So I've read it, but I'm sure not a lot of people have time to read it, but give it to Copilot. He can summarize it for people. They know what his plan is. But yes, majority of people will support that. I think that would be the ideal scenario for Iranians. That's what we're working towards. That's what we're trying to do. I think we kind of see the light beyond this chapter, but obviously the first step is to I think getting to a point where we want Iran to be about maybe 80% of the way going is to get rid of this regime, because while we have this regime in place, there is no rock bottom, if that makes sense. So it's free fall until we get rid of this regime, and that's where our rock bottom is, and we can start to build up from there.
Right.
So we just have to sort of cut our losses as soon as we can, and hopefully that will come soon. Now, going back to your first question, no, I don't think this is going to be 6 weeks from this. It's been 3 weeks into this. They're asking for $200 billion of the Congress for the war. The cost of war is $1 billion a day. So they say obviously they want to replenish their ammunition, which is part of that going to that. But if you do the math, it's not another 3 weeks in my view. They probably get these amphibious carriers to the region in a week or so. There'll be at least a couple of more weeks to open the Strait of Hormuz, and then maybe a couple of more weeks to sort of get them to a point where they want to get to a negotiation position, or the regime falls by now. I don't know. I feel like we're at least a month or two away from this conflict, if Trump wants to see through what he was saying he's going to do. But it's Trump, you never know. He's unpredictable. He may, he through social ceasefire tomorrow. You never know. But yeah, I think from the way it goes, I don't think it's going to be over in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Arash. I think this has given us a really good overview from a high level with your view and opinion. I tend to agree based on information I've got with what you've said there. So you're more than welcome to hang around, or I know you're busy. You've got other things lined up, but I'm going to switch it over to Layla now, and talking about boots on the ground, people on the ground, and those that she's connected to back there in Iran, and perhaps what's also developing in Australia right now to sort of bring it home, so to speak, and things that they can hopefully learn from to not allow to grow here within Australia.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tommy, and appreciate your time. I do really appreciate platforms like this. Help us to sort of be the voice of Iranians, what they actually think and what is happening in reality. So really appreciate that. And thanks, Layla, for sort of setting it up as well. I do have to go, but yeah, leave it to you guys. And
thanks, Arash, for joining.
Thank you.
Okay.
Cheers.
All in the interest of fighting for freedom, my friend, and freeing your people, let alone others as well. But yeah, thanks for making the time.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, no worries. Okay, so Layla, thank you for bringing Arash into the interview. I think that has really given us the background and the high level of what's happening for those that are interested, like I think from a strategic and political point of view, through his view. Yeah. But, then there comes the human factor, and getting the introduction of yourself from what it was like sort of growing up in Iran, when it was kind of normal for you, but it didn't feel normal. You rebelled against already as from a teenager and being a student as to this doesn't seem right, and it's funny how in relative terms, you have, let's say, just women's rights, and we've gone through the whole LGBTQ plus, I forgot what letters are in there, but situation, and thinking life is tough. I don't think our kids have any idea, or let's say Australians in general, apart from those that have fought in wars and been very close to it, and some of the older boomers, what it is like to grow up in a situation that you did. And in a relative sense, you come to a country of Australia because you wanted your freedom and felt your God-given right to exercise that right to pursue it and to find it in this country. But we're seeing things changing in Australia now, being starting to be exposed on the ground with some of the very challenges that almost 50 years ago started in Iran. But when did it switch for you that you started making some decisions? Was there a morning that you woke up and thought, that's it, I'm done here. Hey, family, I love you. I got to go.
Yeah. Very interesting
We can't hear
question,
you.
Tommy.
We may or may not sort of edit this nicely off the end as we go into part 2. But we'll pause here. Intermission for what is a very serious discussion and very topical for the world right now. So all right, we'll take pause here and look forward to the second part of this interview.
Well, that's a wrap for another episode of the Freedom Architect podcast. Now, if this did resonate with you in some way, hit that subscribe button so we can bring more of this to you automatically. And if you feel there's others that would benefit, then please feel free to share it. This really is a purpose-driven labor of love that the team and I work on, bringing interviews of people from around the world, from all walks of life, that in some way are contributing to helping others lead free and sovereign lives, something that we believe is a God-given right. So drop us a comment. We do love to hear from you. And until you join us for the next episode, stay free.